All right, I can see plenty of people in here. I'm looking at these little avatars in the upper corner just to make sure everyone's in. This is looking great. And then if you're interested in following up with me, I've got my email address, Twitter handle, and YouTube channel available there. Slide 2 is your important bookmarks. No teacher should have to start from scratch. Y'all have too much on your plate. So I've created templates on the first link. And there's lots of different templates. I add more every day. You'll notice they're mostly blank. And the purpose of that is that's where you get the student voice. So you'll see a lot of different things on here you can use, reuse, edit, reuse again, modify it, send it to somebody else, and so on. The second link is for Mather Days. This is a free PD that I host every Saturday. And the reason I bring it up now is you're going to do a rich task with us. And I want to send out an invitation to continue doing rich tasks with other math folks who want to come on a Saturday and do some fun math. There's a whole bunch of tasks here. Some of them are related to your grade level, and you can watch these and implement them as is. There's even ones from our Virginia Department of Education in here. All right, those are the two links. I've been talking for too long. It's time to hear from you. So if you join me, there's space on slide 3, 4, or 5. You're going to insert a text box and tell us what celebrations and successes are happening in your lives right now. And the text box is up at the top toolbar. Looks like a little T with a box around it. And you can respond on any slide. And feel free to respond in a variety of ways. If you prefer pictures, animated GIFs, Bitmojis, you name it, this is totally unstructured. This is here for you. And I'll ask a couple of you all to turn on your microphones, elaborate a little more, share that success with the whole group. It's an invitation, so if you would like to share more, I'd love to start off with the teacher who had the student who rarely speaks have a voice in your class today. How did it go?
It was awesome. It was very awesome. Not only did we celebrate that during class with multiple teachers standing up and dancing, so they could see that we were very excited about them not only speaking up, but speaking up when they felt comfortable and confident. But then we gave them the task of being the teacher's helper for the day. Since they kind of had everything down pat, and they loved it. So I hope it kind of ignited something for them to feel a little more comfortable with them speaking up more often.
How wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It, brings joy to my life too, as I'm sure it does to many others. Who has been promoted or reassigned to a classroom teacher, and what are you most excited about?
I'm sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Yeah, I'm Juja Fox from the Rockingham County Public Schools, and I was an ELL teacher for like several years, and I've never really had my own classroom. Like I've never been a classroom teacher, but we had too many teachers that had to teach from home, and so they needed to move some people around, and I was one of the teachers that got to be reassigned. So now I'm a third grade teacher, and I really enjoy just having my own little 15 little kids. That's just very different. It's just a very different dynamics of having your own classroom. And even though I worked with like 40 50 ELL teachers before, this is just so much more cozy, and I feel like it's easier than being an ELL teacher, so I enjoy that.
It's wonderful that you are enjoying your new community of kiddos, fewer kiddos, but that you see regularly. How wonderful. And who put the Nearpod one up there? How's it going with the technology?
that was me. So my kids love the Nearpod games that comes with Nearpod. We've done multiplication and division, and they just love doing that. I just put them on breakout rooms independently and check on them individually, and that's a great way that's been going so far for me.
Wonderful. All right, folks, this is Successes and Celebrations. In every session I do, whether it's teaching kindergarten or something, or it's working with adults, we always start with some sort of successes and celebrations. What it does is it brings our community together and it makes us more likely to actually want to turn on our microphones and talk to one another when you're in breakout rooms. So every single time I make a moment for this, you'll also notice you can respond on successes and celebration. You can respond to each other. It is totally unstructured. And it's like that for the same reasons you all know you need to give the kids indoor recess even when it's raining. They need that unstructured space. So you'll see a couple of examples today of where I use a lot of structure and where I give more space for that. Alrighty. Our norms for success are on slide 6. If you join me there, this session is not a watch passively session. It is very interactive. You're going to be talking a lot, moving things a lot, clicking things a lot. So one of the best norms for success is to put away all distractions. We are recording the session, so make sure you reduce any background noise. If you have questions, and I hope you do, there's a place for them on the very last slide. I call this the virtual parking lot. And the reason I use this is I've anticipated already many questions that I've planned out where I'm going to kind of address them throughout the lesson. But it also gives me a chance to respond to your question in the time that I need to give a good response. And also, when I have downtime, I can go in there and do that. When you're in small groups, all mics on, start right away by sharing and saying hello. Our words matter, so when we talk about children, let's make sure we're using positive asset language. And mistakes are going to happen. That's the case in the classroom, and it's still the case in the virtual world. So when mistakes happen, in a calm voice, you can tell your partners, you can tell the group, hey, just hit Control Z, and then you'll be a Control Z superhero. For safety, make sure you're not driving right now. And if you would like to update your profile picture just to show us a little something else about you, feel free. At this point, I'm going to turn off my camera for internet speeds and also to showcase that you can do a lot of community and stuff without the camera. But before I go, I have a special shirt on for all you guys. It says, it's all fun and games until someone divides by 0. So, all right, I'm going to turn that off. And we are going to jump into our agenda. Slide 7 is our agenda. And today you get to really dive in and do the math. You don't have to pretend like you're a 3rd, 4th, or 5th grader. You can be the person you are with all the experiences, which also includes a teacher of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So you can do it saying, this is what my students would do. You're going to actually move into the discourse. And then we're going to talk about all the teacher roles and reimagine how we do this online. And there's even time for question answer. So as we dive into our rich task, you can join me on slide 8. This is the reason why we do them. You will see all 8 of these math teaching practices highlighted today, not just a few, but all of them. And the last thing before we begin, let's see if we are in the right mindset for today. Take a look at the problem-solving oath on slide 9. As I read it aloud, read it to yourself. And at the end, if this is something you pledge to do tonight, you could write your name in the Zoom chat box. I, Teresa, promise to try my best. I will make sense of patterns and numbers. I will use manipulatives and drawings. I will make mistakes. I will ask questions. I will listen to other ideas. I will stay engaged by always trying to find another solution or representation. I am a problem solver. I make the world a better place. If you'd like to publicly show that you're going to take that pledge today, feel free to write your name there in the chat box. Again, that's over in Zoom, so you have to tab over. Look at all these great problem solvers. Wonderful. All right, problem solvers, if you join me on slide 10, this is our task for today. This comes out of the Virginia Department of Education's Rich Task Bank. It is specifically designed for your grade levels, and we are going to explore it today. Slide 10 says, at the end of art class, 6 tables had leftover blue paint. The amounts are shown below. The art teacher asked Marie to combine 2 cups of paint into her empty cup. Her cup is the same size as the ones on the table. Which containers could Marie combine into her paint cup without it overflowing? Show your math thinking using tools, pictures, words, or numbers. On slide 11, I've provided several tools that I think make an excellent, great start. You are not restricted to these. If you have other tools you like, especially paper pencil tools, any homemade manipulatives, feel free to use those also. Next, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms where you're going to turn on your microphone, say hello to people, and find the slide below that corresponds with your group. And we'll have 20 minutes to really dive deep and get as many representations as we can on that slide. All righty. All right, our breakout rooms, you can turn on your microphone because they are happening right now. All right, so if you are still here, you should have a little message on Zoom. Just tab on over, and it's going to ask you which breakout, it'll tell you what breakout room to go to, and you can just click that and head there.
Hey, Teresa, we just let someone in the meeting that just joined us, Mrs. Duffer, I believe. She probably needs to be put into a room.
I think I put that. So usually at the top. Yes, so everyone should have a room. If anyone is sitting here and listening to me right now, but don't know how to go into the room or don't see a room, please let me know.
I see it, and I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I couldn't get my mouse to work. I have a Mac, and my mouse hides from me every so often. I'm just having a rough time right now. I'm so sorry. Okay,
No problem.
We have someone else joining, I think, right now too, Teresa.
Okay. It works out perfectly because the first couple of minutes, I just like people to be in their rooms without me hovering over.
Mm. I think I'm gonna just stay out here today too and not join a room, just kind of hang.
Yeah, I didn't know if, we needed someone to hang here because in case somebody comes back in to the main room.
Did we want to admit this person? Is there any reason I should not hit admit? Okay, there it goes.
It just took
Yeah,
a second for it to
we
go
did.
through. Yeah.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, notice we have quite a few more folks today. Maybe the timing or the day of the week, because I know it switched up from last time. So cool.
Right.
All right, I'm going to go in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mhm.
That-
So if you did just join us, I'm going to send you the link to the slides that we are looking at. What we just did is explored the problem. And this is the pouring paint task on the Virginia Department of Education website. And right now, people are coming up with a variety of representations, and then we are going to explore some of those representations. So once you're there, you can scroll on down and check those out. All right, everyone, welcome back to the main room. Before we go into our discussion, the part where we make connections between representations, I'd like you to take just a moment and look through all the slides of everyone else who is here today, at the different models that they created, what they might mean, the technology involved, and all this came out of 20 minutes of work. And yes, I do recognize that when I say 20 minutes, we are a bunch of educators doing this. But one thing that I really love about teaching children is that it does not take them that long before they're starting to explore manipulatives and screenshot and paste stuff to the slide. And when they get really proficient at the technology side of a certain manipulative, whether it's from Math Learning Center or somewhere else, they can get really quick about putting their representations up. Alrighty, if you join me on slide 22, I'm going to share out a little bit of what we're going to do next and where it comes from. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to model the 5 practices for orchestrating mathematics discussions. In this model, I started off by anticipating not only the solution to the problem, but also multiple ways at which students might solve the problem and the technology that they might choose or need to use in order to show their thinking. Next is the monitoring stage. This was in the moment today. Every time I do this problem, there's always slightly different ones that I'll pick from because it's all student work. So I'm only using work that you all created. I'm not putting any of my own stuff out here. I've listened, observed, I've talked with you all in your small groups, and I've selected just a couple and sequenced them in a very purposeful order so that now in the discussion time, I can make connections. And we're going to start our connections on slide 23. And I've got a little arrow over here. We'll make it blue. In one group, they were really talking about 1/2. And so if this was yours from your group, would you tell us why this was useful in solving the problem? And feel free, if you recognize that, to turn on your mic and share with us a little bit about what you were thinking. I think it was someone from group 7. And that's all right. I'll give us all a minute here to read it. It says 5/10 is equal to 1/2. We know 5/12 is a little less than 1/2 because 1/2 would be 6/12. So we know if we combine the two, we'll have less than a whole cup. And typically at this point, I would ask the students, why is 1/2 so important? And I'm looking for kind of different reasons why 1/2 plays such a big role in this solution. Because 5/10 and 5/12 really doesn't have much to do with 1/2. So I'll give everyone that opportunity. In the chat box in Zoom, why do you think 1/2 is so important to this statement? So this kind of turned out nicely because we're getting so many different responses here. I'd love to follow up with Tawny. You mentioned it helps us compare fractions with different denominators. And how do you see 1/2 being helpful with different denominators?
It's a nice benchmark for me. So when I saw 5/12, I knew that 6/12 was equal to 1/2. So I knew that 5/12 would be really close to that 1/2. And then it helps me compare.
Nice. It's a nice little easy kind of fraction, right? We're comfortable with it. Well, there's another really nice number, and that's 1/2. And in our next model below, Sarah, if you could tell us a little bit, I was first curious because this model has nice little endings. Everything lines up until we get to here, and it doesn't line up. So, Sarah, would you tell us a little bit about your model, how you created it, and how it works with some friendly numbers?
Yeah, so I first was looking for a whole that I could divide into both thirds and fourths so that I could see if the 1/3 and 3/4 would work by modeling it. And so the whole, I chose 12 parts in the Cuisenaire rods. And so then I built the whole with the thirds, the purple thirds and the green fourths, and then put together 1/3 plus 3/4, and you can see that it ends up being 1 block too much, or it would be 13/12 if you put them together, not. So therefore you would make a big paint mess.
I love that way of too much. And so not only can we say too much, but we can take the arrow and we could be like, boom, right there. That is the part that is too much. So here we're using that lovely benchmark of 1/2 and getting things to be either more than a whole or less. So this strategy is all about benchmarks. We could have a whole lesson on that. That could be one discussion. Slide 24 has a slightly different discussion, and we'll take a minute to explore what they did there. And I'm going to start off actually with the model at the bottom. So if you were this green and orange model, would you tell us a little bit about it? What were you thinking? How did you start the model? And how did it end up where it is?
So in our group, someone was talking about that they did 2/8 and 3/4 to start. And so we used the top bar to show that if you combine 2 8s and 3/4, we knew that would make one whole because it was 4/4. So the cup would be completely full. And then I said, when I first looked at it, I saw 1/4 and 1/2 in 2 8s and 5 tenths. And so we also put that option on our board.
Oh, I see. Okay, so these are two different problems. Is that right?
Yes. So we weren't using the top in order to show that the bottom was less. The first one was one person's idea, and the second one was a second person's idea.
Okay, and how did you know that 2 8ths was the same as 1/4?
Because I think the person explained that they just simplified the fraction. They just knew they were equivalent.
They knew that equivalent fraction. Awesome, great fractional sense. And I see some other fractional sense happening over here in our abstract version. If this was you, could you pick one of these and tell us kind of what you were thinking, what you were doing?
Yes, we had a couple of different ideas. We were trying to just think of some random ideas as well, filling up some measuring cups with water and things like that, having the kids kind of experiment with filling and actually getting an overflow to see what would work. But we first wanted to spend our time by just doing some quick mental math with just paper and pencil. And so we were just writing down some different options. We saw that we knew that it couldn't overflow, but didn't say anything about underflowing. So we were trying to come up with as many options as we could at first before we started using any kind of models.
Gotcha. And then when you were thinking of, I'm going to look at this one for example, the 3/4 plus 1/5. What was the mental math that you were doing, or maybe the notebook math that isn't seen here, that helped you to get this equation right here?
So we were trying to find a least common denominator. We tried to find a least common denominator with all of them at first, and then found that it was easier just to pick and choose, and then also try to find, again, a lot of mental math, try to find some fractions that were equivalent to other fractions. So then with the 3/4 plus the 1/5, we knew that the least common denominator would be 20. And so then we came up with our actual problem, and we weaned it down to 19/20ths, which was just under a whole.
All right, so who sees a connection between the model Wayne talked about and this model down here? I'm going to make it light blue and dark blue. We can talk about the two blue arrows. If you see a connection, I'll notice when your microphone's on, feel free to just turn on your mic, and you can go ahead and tell us, what connection do you see between those two blue arrows?
So I see the light blue arrow is showing 3/4 plus 1/4. And I know that 1/4 is greater than 1/5. If I had one pie that I was sharing with 5 friends, I would have smaller pieces than if I had one pie that I was sharing with 4 friends. So if 3/4 plus 1/4 is exactly one whole, 3/4 plus 1/5 would be a little less than one whole.
Oh, nice reasoning there, Sally. So you're looking at, hey, we already did all the hard work here. So now that we have this hard work, we can use that across lots of different ones. Thanks so much for sharing. Who else sees a connection?
Well, I didn't say I found a common denominator when I originally talked, but I essentially was finding a common denominator with changing 2 8s into 1/4, as they were trying to find a common denominator in theirs mathematically.
So because now we have it in fourths, it kind of lines up all pretty. It uses the same color. Lovely. And then we do have one other model. I'd love to hear from the authors of this one. How about we do this one as a purple arrow? Who did the purple arrow, and how did you use this model to help you make sense of the problem?
Well, I was making sense of the problem, but also trying to make sense of the tools. And I wasn't sure how to combine different denominators on my number line there. So I did some equivalent fractions and marked off half of my line, which on there was 6/12, but that combined is equivalent to my 5/10. So then I could draw out the 5/12 across the top and show that that did not reach one whole.
So what I heard you say there was 6/12 is the same as 1/2 is the same as 5/10. So earlier when we had in the light blue arrow 2 fractions that were equal, now you've used that to make 3 fractions equal. So we've done a couple things on this slide here. We've talked about common denominators, but also equivalent fractions in the same context. And so, in many cases, they can be the exact same context. And in our next one, we'll talk about a different strategy. Who's the author of slide 25? What did you do here, and how did that help you make sense of the problem?
I'm not sure if that might be the one from group 2, because that's what we had at first, and then we changed. I changed it, but to get started, if that's ours, I just used the fraction bars to show 1/3, 1/5, knowing that I had to have each part had to be parts of the same sized whole. So I can look at that visually and just see that it's not going to be one whole.
And when you say see visually, is there some part of this that you're purposely looking for?
Yes, I'm looking to go, from one end to the other. Well, so then we decided, well, how big is it? So then I changed the graphic. So on slide 2 or whatever slide we were on, I changed the graphic so that we could see the one hole underneath it.
Oh, yes. I remember that you had done that there. So this problem here, the reason why I kind of grabbed it in the moment, and this is one of the advantages to online learning, is when you grab in the moment, you get the kids rough draft thinking before they had a chance to modify it, change it. And they can always go back and say, hey, if you look up at our slide, we continued with it. But what's neat here is in the previous slide, we talked all about denominators. And I believe it was Sally. I hope I remembered and wrote down your name correctly, but you started talking about size of the pieces. If that was you, how do the size of the pieces help us here?
So we can see that 1/5 is less than 1/3, and that visual is very helpful because if we're so focused on whole number thinking, a lot of children will think that 1/5 is greater than 1/3 until they see it visually.
Great. All right, folks. So far in our conversation, we talked about benchmarks. We talked about making common denominators and equivalent fractions. And here we've talked about comparing using common numerators. All of that's going to really help us as we move down to slide 26. And now we're going to start to kind of look at this as more of an area model and fitting the pieces together. So I'd like to show you, if you don't already know, where the scribble tool is. This is incredibly useful for times like right now. The scribble tool is underneath the line. And I'll put a screenshot here on the page. So it's right down there at the bottom. If you see a way that some of these different rainbow pieces could go together, grab that scribble tool and group them together. I'll make another copy there. So grab that scribble tool and show us which two could go together. Or maybe you found three that go together. And this is a great opportunity. I can model what I had said before. If you make a mistake, no worries. Just hit Control Z. It'll go back to the way you had it before. And that's how you become a Control Z superhero. So we could take some time and explore the Google Slides a little bit more and how to give more kids a voice here. But as we close up the end of the discussion, I want to be very purposeful about the moves I made as a teacher. First of all, you had 20 minutes of time to work on the task in small groups. Some small groups dove right in. Some took 5 minutes to think and then put some things down and then talk. Other groups were browsing different group slides because maybe they wanted new ideas. There was a lot happening in the breakout rooms. I was also questioning you and giving you some different ideas of ways to think about this. I selected only a few, and granted, I actually selected quite a few because I was talking with teachers. Usually it would just be one of these slides, and ask questions to connect them together. Throughout the presentation, I try to make sure I asked everyone to have a voice, both in the chat box, using your microphone, but also directly on the slides by using things like the scribble tool and moving some different things around. And finally, on slide 28, these were the discussion prompts that I was gearing towards. I always like to know what these are before I do the task, and the Virginia Department of Education has these for you in the documents. It makes it so easy to figure out like what's all the meat I could get out of this problem. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute exploration break, and then we're going to come back. On slide 29 are 2 links for you to explore. The first one is the Virginia Department of Education website where the Bank of Rich tasks are located. The second one is this task. And even if you consider yourself an expert in these materials, take another look and with a new lens, try to find that other gem that you haven't noticed or you maybe have forgotten about and refamiliarize yourself with these documents. We'll come back at 5:07. All right, everyone, welcome back. I hope you had a moment for you to find a gem that you either had forgotten what's there and are excited about again or something new. These resources are rich, complex, and amazing all at the same time. So you've had that. The other thing I wanted to showcase to you, Debbie wrote me about this that we talked about in the last session, is how to use 2 really easy tools within Google Slides for fractions. So start off by joining me on slide 29. And we've talked about where the scribble tool is, but another thing that's really great is simply the line tool. By when kids make their models by adding a line, I might even increase the thickness. I can move this across here, and I can, when the fractions get really tiny, I can use this as a benchmarker to see different sizes. The other really easy tool that's super efficient is the tables. You're probably used to tables before, like, you've used tables. Have you used them this way? Insert table. Let's say my fraction has 10 as the denominator. I think, what was it, 5/10? And I'm going to color these. The other fraction, insert table. Wasn't it 12ths? And I can make those a different color. I can then take those and make them the same size pieces by stretching it. So if we're talking about common numerators, now I can talk about common numerators. They both have 5. They're the same size, but what happened to the whole? And I can also bring this back so that they are the same size. So those are 2 really just useful tools that I like to use. I can put one on top of the other real easily and see what that does to the problem. And those are just tables. Alrighty. At this point, I want to hear from you all. Everyone gets a voice on slide 31, 32, or 33. What opportunities were available because of the technology? There are a couple on here that I'd like to invite our typer to tell us a little bit more about. On slide 31, the yellow box, how did you experience this today? And why is this an opportunity?
Well, we had 4 people in our group, and 2 of us were actually from the same county, but then one was from Waynesboro and one was from Chesterfield. And it's just, I miss talking to people from other areas at conferences. And so it's good to have that opportunity virtually to be able to just, ask, how are things going? What are you experiencing as we're working on the task together?
Absolutely. And that works for students also. If you have a buddy teacher from the other side of Virginia and you're bringing your class together to all work together in Zoom or even on the same Google Slides, there's a lot of connections we can make and build even larger communities because of that. Thanks for sharing. The person in the green box on slide 32, would you tell us a little bit about how you experienced that today?
So we had, I think, 4 or 5 in our group. I can't even remember now. It's the end of the day, but many of us chose different models, and we were able to just play around with these models and adjust them, and then we could show our thinking and talk about them as we were refining our thinking. So it was nice and safe.
Yeah. And Google Slides has a nice option with it. And I call it dynamic pictorial because even though a lot of these are images, you can still change them. It's not like when you have a sheet of paper on, taped to the wall and an image is there, it's there forever. We have to imagine it. No, we can actually physically stretch the boxes. We can stretch the hole until it snaps with another hole. And that's something that we just don't have in the face-to-face classroom. So there are some advantages there.
Right. Yes.
Awesome. How about the pink box? How did you experience that today?
Okay, that one's me. Sorry, technical issues. Just the opportunity to talk with people that I've never met. We couldn't see each other. I'm having to do this from my phone. So that has been a technical issue for me, but we were still able to talk about it. And one person was able to type, One person did the manipulatives and snipped those and put them together, and we were just able to collaborate and have great discussion, and then talked about which online manipulatives that we liked and which ones we preferred versus ones that you had shared that some of us had never seen before, and that kind of thing. So it was just, again, talking to adults proves to be very beneficial these days for mental status, as well as knowing that other people are in the same boat. So that
Yeah,
helped
and
all
what
of us.
you bring and what you bring up there are two really important things. First of all, community, and making your little community, your little pod of the group you are with within there. And one of the ways you made community is by assigning roles, which is something you probably do in the classroom anyways. So having a role here of you're going to be the manipulative person, I'm going to be the typer, you're going to be the mayor, and the mayor's job is to make sure everyone's voice is heard. And you can assign those same roles in online spaces too. Several people brought up the idea of they're free manipulatives. There's infinite space for many representations, and you don't have to clean them, and it's quieter. So those are some other things to think about, and important things. But when you're talking about this idea of infinite space, you saw in the discussion that I snagged somebody else's thinking before it was finished. And that's one thing I really love is getting that rough draft thinking or the misconception. And so I'll snag that early. I might even talk to the group, "Hey, I noticed you changed your answer. What were you thinking before?" And when they explain the misconception to me, I'll even ask them, are you brave enough to share that with the whole class? Like where you thought and now where you went? Because I bet other people could use that. And because I had their rough draft thinking and their final thinking, I can really showcase them as being like this hero that, persisted through it, as opposed to like, here's the wrong answer. So those are some other nice things. All right, folks. So how do we do this? How do you do this with other tasks? On slide 34, I share with you kind of my formula for how I think about rich tasks online. And I use the SAMR model. This is a pretty popular model in tech ed that looks at the way that we use technology. But I've redesigned it a little bit for math tasks, and that's on slide 35. And so the first part of slide 35 says, how do we do the exact same thing we would have done in a face-to-face class? And we had an example of that. I'm going to go ahead and paste it right here. We've got someone who worked on a whiteboard, took a picture, and uploaded it. Perfect example of how we do a simple transfer of the exact same thing. But then the next level up is thinking about what are cool tips and tricks that make online more efficient. So here we're talking about copy, paste, and duplicate. You notice I took those duplicate copies and kind of saved them down at the bottom for the discussion. That made it more efficient. But how do we make the task better online? We do things like stretching. Stretching the pieces out. We do things like everybody combines and draws on the space, much like we did up here. And I'm going to scoot that off to the side of the screen so you can still reference it. So everyone was kind of participating in there. We had the whole class's voice and everyone kind of had a little check-in. And then finally, I often think about how could we only do this task online? Like it just couldn't have been done another way. And we had talked about, hey, what if we get Montgomery County and Fairfax County and put those two counties together that are very far apart, but we can talk to the other kiddos in another class who've done the same problem. We can combine our representations there. And that's something that can only be done online. And I also want to give you the freedom of you don't always have to go here. This is, another way of thinking, but not required. All right, so that's a little insight into how I do it. Now I'd like to hear from you. I'm going to spend the next about 12 minutes here giving my experience in biggest concerns for teaching online So you can feel free to fill in a box on 36, 37, or 38. And I'll start off with talking about the number one concern that I hear, and that is, but how do my kids do the Google Slides? And it's a process. Much like learning to walk down the hall is a process that it would be great if they learned it before third, fourth, and fifth grade, but you probably are still modeling it at the beginning of the school year. And so you do the same thing in Google Slides. On slide 41, I've shown an example of a scavenger hunt that I do with my kiddos. This is all about Google competencies. Do you know how to add a text box? Do you know how to add an image, a shape? And depending on my students, we might just do one of these a day. We might do multiple. We might do the whole thing. But this is an example of what I do. And there's the more wordy version on slide 39. And that part about keeping kids on task when you're in other rooms has so much to do with the public space. So when we give kids this public space to put all their representations up on, and then you use the student representations in the discussions, you don't kind of go off track and bring in your own, but you use theirs. That's showing them that you value their representation, and they are more likely to put representations up there so that they can, have that information up. Chromebooks don't allow us to split screens, so I actually usually just use a Chromebook for everything, and I'll show you what I do for seeing two things at once. So if that's yours, I'm going to put a response right next to it. There's a little video that shows you how you can kind of stagger the screens. There's a couple things coming in here about breakout rooms in general. And so I can at least tell you some things that I have found about breakout rooms. And one of them is that administrators are looking for a plan. If that's the case for you, I'll offer you these planning materials starting on slide 39. But they are things that administrators usually want to know before doing breakout rooms, and that's that you have a plan to do it. So typically, when I start breakout rooms, I start with just 2 minutes with 2 kiddos and 2 really low stakes questions. And what I'm looking for is these things down here: comfort with the microphone. They can demonstrate kindness, use safety protocol, and implement the classroom norms. And only then do I move into the next level, the next phase of breakout rooms, where I can increase the number of students or the time, but I'm still giving them a low-level task because I want to make sure that they're focusing again on these descriptors. And then only then would I move them into a larger group for this type of task. So there's a little bit of work to do beforehand. This is a fully editable slide, so if it helps, especially in conversations with, teachers, administrators, and more, you can make this what you want it to be. Someone brings up equity, and that is something that is very dear to my heart. And when I started this whole online journey, equity was at the forefront. We were using just a Chromebook, no dual screens, just the Chromebook alone, and no downloadable products. Everything had to be free that we were using, and that's how I got into using the Google Slides. One nice thing is finally, every kid has access to all the manipulatives out there. It's not just the school who had the biggest PTA fundraiser, or the teacher who has access to the math closet. The virtual manipulatives really give this opportunity for everyone. Someone mentioned seeing and understanding students thinking in real time. I had mentioned earlier that on my website, I have some templates and whatnot to support with that. What you're doing right now by writing in these boxes is a way that I can see your thinking in real time. But also, there's a lot of other strategies that I do for thinking in real time. Something that might be useful is remote math routines. So if you're used to like number talks, how do you see their thinking in real time? There's a little like video that'll walk you through different ways that you can make sure that you're getting student thinking, from Notice and Wonder, CNC, what comes next. And they're all based on student thinking. So you can see all these cells are constantly populating with thinking and movement. So again, if you're looking for some more of those, here you go. I'll also point you towards these frequently asked questions on slide 48. If you're like, okay, but how do I start this? Maybe you want to watch how to start drag and drop slides. If you're curious about cloning things, or maybe you want to use Google Translate to read out your problem in both English and in a home language, there's directions for that as well. In the virtual parking lot, someone asked the 3 ways I do collaboration, interaction, and student voice. So whenever I do online things, those are the 3 areas that I'm looking at. Collaboration being more heads are better than one. Like, because you're in groups, you're going to be thinking and learning better. And interaction are all the clicks, movements, typing, screenshotting, and student voice is a little bit of all. So we do have just a couple more questions left. If I didn't address yours, or you have other thoughts, feel free to turn on your microphone. But folks, take it slow. You've got this, and when you have a success, please share it out with other teachers. That's how you inspire people. And it doesn't need to be perfect before you share it. You can share it in any way you have.
So we're going to close things out this evening, but if you have questions, continue to put them in the virtual parking lot. And you'll notice that Kristen Williams has uploaded into the chat box your certificate for participating tonight. We're so grateful that you gave up a late afternoon, early evening to be with us today. And we thank Dr. Wills so much for this presentation tonight. I hope it has invigorated those who've attended and have encouraged you to utilize some new tools from tonight's experience. So Kristen, did you notice any particular questions that might have been asked in the chat that Dr. Wills has not had a chance to address?
No, I didn't notice any questions that she didn't address. She always does such a wonderful job making sure all of the concerns and questions are answered. And I love the virtual parking lot. And I think that was a really good way to make sure that people were able to put down their questions.
Yes. Yes. So Teresa, if you want to take on some of those in the virtual parking lot, feel free to, but we understand if folks have to log out. So many of you have to prepare dinner for your families tonight. So again, we thank you for joining us. Feel free to hang on if you want to hear some of the additional responses to questions.
And if you have difficulty downloading the certificate of attendance in the chat, just feel free to email me and I can email it to you.
Everyone's asking about third grade math. One second, there is. Yes, I'm just trying to find my book.
So we first recommend that you start at the DOE website, but Teresa also has recommendations for other locations.
Yeah, so you definitely want to use everything that the VDOE has because it matches right with our SOLs, and that's going to make your life so much easier. The other recommendation I have is in Peg Smith's new book. They're by grade level. And so you can also see the way that the 5 practices are implemented with the rich tasks too. So if you're looking for even more, so if you've done all the ones on there, you're looking for more, it's another great resource. I think that's everything on there. I've gotten to those. Again, stay in touch. I've got my email, my website and Twitter handle and YouTube channel there. And just stay in touch and, keep sharing your successes with other people. It's been a pleasure, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks again, Teresa. We certainly appreciate your working with us tonight. And I guess we'll see you in just a little while.
Sounds good.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anthony, I just emailed you the certificate, so you should have it in your inbox.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. You have a wonderful evening.
You too.